The evening I arrived at Bramwell Manor, a thin fog had settled over the countryside, making the grand stone estate loom like a grey spectre. I had been called to this remote part of England to appraise an estate, but more specifically, a collection of rare curiosities owned by Lord Bramwell, the recently deceased head of the household. His solicitor, Mr. Fenton, greeted me at the door, his pale face barely visible under the brim of his bowler hat. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Alcott," he murmured, gripping my hand with a clammy strength. "There are a few items in the collection that we thought might warrant a professional's discretion." Curiosity stirred within me, and though my instincts cautioned me, I was eager to explore Bramwell's famed collection. Fenton led me to the sitting room, where a fire crackled feebly against the cold of the manor. Above the fireplace was an assortment of peculiar relics, but my eye was drawn immediately to an hourglass. Its frame was wrought of dark iron, the glass a smoky, almost obsidian black. It looked out of place among the other trinkets, as though it was something old, ancient even, in a house full of antiques. "Tell me about this hourglass," I asked, unable to pull my gaze from it. Mr. Fenton hesitated, his hand briefly hovering near the object as if considering whether to touch it. "This is no ordinary hourglass," he said finally. "It's been in the Bramwell family for centuries, passed down from father to son. Legend has it, it's cursed." The hourglass had been passed down through generations, its origins woven into the fabric of old whispers and shadows. It was said to have once belonged to a Nathaniel Bramwell, an alchemist who dwelled in the manor centuries before it became the elegant estate it is now. Bramwell was an outcast in the village, a reclusive figure feared for his mysterious practices. He was rumored to hold powers that could alter time itself. Many claimed he'd sold his soul for this gift, seeking dominion over life and death, a way to twist fate to his own whims. One fateful night, after months of eerie silence from his chambers, Bramwell was found dead. His body lay on the floor beside the hourglass, his hand frozen mid-air as though trying to halt the last grains of sand from slipping through. His eyes were open, frozen in an expression of horror. Beside him lay a notebook, now brittle with age, in which he had recorded a final, cryptic warning. "Beware the sands that bind. They are the gate to realms unseen, to futures unwritten and pasts unsought. Turn it at your own peril, once for fortune, twice for despair, thrice for doom." After his death, strange occurrences began to plague the manor. Each owner who dared to turn the hourglass found themselves haunted by shadowy figures, glimpsed only in flickering candlelight, or by whispering voices that seemed to rise from the walls. Some spoke of time slipping away in unnatural ways. Days would vanish in an instant, or linger, stretching hours into days, leaving the occupants disoriented, their lives touched by an unseen hand. Worst of all, those who turned the glass 3 times would face the ultimate curse. They would lose themselves entirely, caught forever between moments, unable to age, to eat, to drink, or to die, trapped in an eternal twilight, neither here nor there. Several such souls are rumored to wander the manor still, lingering as pale shadows locked in the last moments of their lives, forever bound by the curse of the hourglass. They say that if you listen closely at night, you might hear Nathaniel's faint voice, muttering an incantation from beyond, the hourglass glowing faintly in the darkness, waiting for the next unwitting soul to turn it once more. I chuckled at the melodramatic statement, but his expression remained grave. "Sir, if I may advise," he continued, voice barely above a whisper, "do not touch it. Lord Bramwell, he was obsessed with it. When he grew ill, he would sit here for hours staring at it. Sometimes he'd turn it, and after each turn he seemed weaker, frailer. The doctors said it was consumption, but—" He trailed off, glancing toward the hourglass with evident fear. Brushing aside the solicitor's superstition, I assured him I'd proceed with caution, and he left me to my appraisal. The hours passed uneventfully as I documented items, sketched their likenesses, and jotted down notes, but all the while that hourglass lingered in my periphery, calling to me. Midnight had come and gone when I found myself standing before it again, as though drawn by an invisible hand. The object was beautiful in its dark way. The iron frame was intricately carved, and the black sand inside looked almost liquid as it rested in the lower bulb. Against my better judgment, I reached out and wrapped my fingers around its cold frame. The moment I touched it, an unnatural chill ran up my arm, spreading into my chest like ice water. I felt compelled to turn it. The instant I did, I heard a faint whisper echo through the room, a voice too soft to make out, yet unmistakably human. Startled, I pulled back, but it was too late. The sand had begun to fall, grain by grain, in a slow, hypnotic cascade. Suddenly, the fire dimmed, the flames turning an eerie shade of green. The manor, once filled with the gentle ticking of a clock, fell into complete silence. It was a silence so profound that I felt suffocated by it. I stared at the hourglass, frozen in place, as images began to flood my mind. Visions of men and women in Victorian dress, their faces gaunt, eyes hollow, each staring blankly at the hourglass in their turn. The scenes played out in rapid succession, each face more despairing than the last, and then my own reflection. I saw myself, years older, staring into the hourglass as the last grains of sand fell. My face twisted in horror. The whispering grew louder, forming words. "Your time, Mr. Alcott. Do you wish to know it?" A chill slid down my spine. "No. What?" The voice answered, calm and soft, yet filled with a cruel amusement. "The hour of your death, Mr. Alcott. It draws nearer with every turn." In a panic, I tried to turn the hourglass back to stop the sand from falling, but my hand slipped from the iron frame, unable to grip it. A heavy weight settled in my chest as the sands continued to fall. The whispers became wails, screams of agony echoing in my ears, but they were joined by something worse, a dry, raspy laugh. Frantic, I stumbled backward, heart pounding, but the manor's walls seemed to close in on me, the sitting room stretching and twisting into a distorted labyrinth. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, figures that seemed to watch me with hollow eyes. And all the while, that laugh echoed like the scraping of iron against bone. I fled to my room, locking the door and collapsing onto the bed, but my sleep was plagued with visions. I was trapped in a dark, endless void, with only the hourglass before me, suspended in the air, its sand pouring relentlessly. Each grain felt like a heartbeat, drawing me closer to some terrible fate. A pressure built in my chest, a sense of impending doom so intense it woke me, gasping, drenched in sweat. The next day, I tried to leave Bramwell Manor. I packed my things and told Mr. Fenton I couldn't complete the appraisal, but when I reached the front door, I found it bolted shut, as though it hadn't been opened in years. The windows, too, were locked, and Fenton was nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me as I ran from room to room, but every exit was barred, every window darkened. I returned to the sitting room, drawn by some terrible compulsion, and there it was, the hourglass sitting as it had before, untouched and yet with more sand in the lower bulb than before. I realized with a mounting dread that it was counting down. My time was slipping away, one grain at a time. I tried smashing it, throwing it against the wall, but each time it reappeared on the mantel, the sand falling steadily, unstoppably. Days bled into nights, and I lost all sense of time. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, my every thought consumed by the falling sand. One night as I sat watching it, the voice returned, soft as a lover's whisper. "Embrace it, Mr. Alcott. Every soul in Bramwell's line has tried to escape, but all found their end here." It was then I noticed a detail I had missed before, a faint etching on the iron frame, barely visible. It read, Tempus fugit, mors veniet. Time flies, death comes. As the final grains of sand began to fall, I looked into the glass, seeing my own hollow face staring back at me, my eyes sunken, my skin pale as death. The last grain fell, and I felt a sharp, icy grip around my heart, pulling me into the darkness. The hourglass sits on Bramwell's mantle still, waiting for its next victim, counting down eternally, its cursed sands forever draining, forever claiming.